All right, it's been a long road, but we finally made it. My top 10 games of all time.
Are you excited?
I'm excited.
Don't tell me not to get excited!
Hey, what's up, Brew Crew? Before I get into my top 10, I want to say thanks to everyone who have liked and commented on these videos. I've always said that I wanted this to be a community-focused channel, and I don't make much of a community on my own. So thanks for watching, and thanks for being a part of the Brew Crew. I'd love some feedback as well. Was 100 games too many? Should I maybe cut it down to 50 next year? Let me know what you think. Now that this series is coming to an end, I've got a few other things in the works that should be coming out soon, like a distilled expansion review and a video encyclopedia of board game terms. So even though this top 100 is coming to an end, be sure to stick around because we've got a lot more cool things coming up. All right, now on to my top 10 games of all time.
10.
My number 10 game is Yokohama. I've heard this one described pretty often as Istanbul, which was earlier on my list, on steroids. I think that's pretty accurate. Like in Istanbul, you'll need to create a route around a modular set of tiles. You'll be dropping assistants around the city trying to create a path for your president to follow. You're trying to stop at different locations and gather up resources to fulfill contracts, make money, build shops and trade houses, and generally do all the usual Euro-y type stuff. For me, it's all about that puzzle of having the assistants in the right place at the right time to get what you need when you need it. Not only do the assistants create the route that you can follow, they also determine how strong of an action you can take once you get there. As you fulfill the contracts with the goods that you're gathering, you're also trying to collect sets of country flag symbols. So you want to try to diversify the countries you're fulfilling contracts to as much as possible to score extra points at the end of the game. This is definitely one of those types of games where you can kind of enjoy your own little victories even when you don't win the game. There are plenty of different strategies to try, and it can feel really good to accomplish what you set out to do at the beginning of the game, even if it doesn't necessarily mean winning the game. At least that's how it feels for me playing this one. This thing is definitely a bit of a table hog when you lay out all of the tiles, although it seems like games are trending bigger, so it's probably just the average now. So I guess maybe it's my game table that's too small. I see that they're coming out with a new edition of Yokohama from Synapsis Games, and while it has a pretty nice new cover art, I'm pretty happy with my old Tasty Minstrel Deluxeified edition.
9.
Number 9 is my favorite of the Madigo Area Control trilogy of games, and that's Kemet, or Kemet Blood and Sand, or whatever the next iteration of Kemet is going to be in 2024. It seems like this game gets a new 0.5 edition every 6 months, which is kind of odd, but it's fine because it's a great game. This is a super aggressive game with a great ancient Egyptian theme. Each player controls a city and pyramids, and you're going to move out your armies from there and fight other players, recruit monsters, and try to control temples to earn permanent or temporary victory points. The addition of the temporary victory points keeps things very tense because you never really feel safe. If someone is able to wrestle control of a temple away from you, then you have to give up that temporary victory point, and you're trying to be the first one to start a turn with 9 points. So when your opponents notice that you're about to win, they are going to come after you hard. You better have a plan. One of the best things about this game are the power tiles. There are different colored power tiles that you'll be collecting, and they're going to let you break the game in some way. They'll give you some kind of special power, or they may let you control some giant monster. By the end of the game, you'll have likely a big tableau of tiles in front of you, and you'll be able to pull off some pretty epic maneuvers. This is a game that really encourages aggression because you're going to score points for being the person doing the attacking. So if you want to win this game, you really can't turtle and invest in defense. You really need to be getting all up in your opponent's faces. And I keep saying that I generally don't like super aggressive games, but I really think it depends on the type of game that it is. In a game that's all about battles and aggression, it really doesn't bother me. If I'm trying to build up something and someone has an opportunity to tear it down, I'm going to be selling that game. But Kemet is fantastic and one of the best thematic fighting type games that I have ever played.
8.
Number 8 is Dungeon Pets. This game was as high as my number 2 game at one point, and I still really adore this game. I love the charming theme and the cute monster pets that you'll actually be raising to sell to dungeon lords. The art is amazing and it really draws you into this little world. There's so many things that I love about this game, but it's definitely a heavier game than you would expect just based on the artwork and hearing about the cutesy theme. The first thing I love about this game is the simultaneous bidding for action spaces. I think the only other game that I've played and really enjoyed with this mechanism was Fresco. Basically, you are in charge of a family of imps, and you're going to be splitting them up into teams and sending them off to town, maybe with a little money, to pick up pets, cages, food, and all of the other things that you will need to raise your monsters. So as you send out your groups, the largest group goes first, and then smaller and smaller groups are sent. But because you're setting everything up in secret, there's a lot of tension around trying to make the right decisions. You've got to know what you want to do and also anticipate what your opponents are going to want and try to plan accordingly. Then once you get out to the marketplace, you're going to be getting these little monsters, which are such a cool concept. They have a little wheel on them which shows different colors along the bottom. And these colors represent the different needs of your monster. They might want to play, they might get hungry, they might get angry, or get sick. And you'll be trying to make sure that you can satisfy all of their needs, because if you can't, they might break out and injure one of your workers, or they might run away, or what's even worse, you may have to put a little sadness cube on them, which feels awful. As the game goes on, these little wheels will turn, showing that your monster pet will need more and more things until you're finally able to sell them off to a dungeon lord to put in their dungeon. The last time we played this, we played with the Dark Alleys expansion, and I liked some of the things that it added, but overall, I think the base game is all you really need to enjoy this one.
7.
My number 7 is Twilight Imperium 4th edition. Now, I've never played 3rd edition, so I won't be able to compare the two, but I can absolutely say that this game has given me some of my favorite gaming memories. For almost all of 2019 and right up until things changed in early 2020, we played this game about once a month. For as heavy and as long as this game is, we've racked up quite a few plays. This will be a hard one to give a rules overview for because there's so much going on in the game, but basically you're playing as one of over 20 different factions trying to become the new rulers of the galaxy. In its most basic terms, though, it's essentially a race to 10 points, or 14 if you don't mind losing a whole weekend. You'll be scoring these points by completing objectives, most of which will be public and only scored during a specific phase, but you'll also have some personal objectives, some of which will be scored in the objective phase and some which could be scored immediately. This makes the game super tense when you start getting into the endgame situation, because you can never really trust an opponent's motives for doing anything. A big part of what makes this game so much fun to play is the fact that no two games of it are ever going to be the same. So much of the story that unfolds has to do with the factions being played, the objectives that come out, and the way the map is laid out. And while a lot of the objective cards are military based, there are a lot of them that have nothing to do with being aggressive. You may get a lot of objectives based on trade and resources, so you need to keep those space cats in check. Or maybe technology is a big deal, and you got to watch out for the universities of Jolnar or the Necrovirus. There's also a lot of objectives which come down to controlling planets of a certain type. And if you don't have any of those in your pie slice of the galaxy, then you might just have to go take one from your neighbor. I also love the promissory notes in these situations. Some are definitely better than others, but they can give you something that you can trade with outside of resources. These could be things like ceasefire or support for the throne, which can be used to stop a player from attacking you, or at least make them think twice about it. Once somebody claims Mechatol Rex in the center of the map, a whole new phase is introduced to the game, and players will spend influence points from planets that they control to vote on laws and directives, which can also alter the gameplay. This phase has a lot of wheeling and dealing going on, and it gives players just a little bit of control over the game balance. I've never once had a bad game of Twilight Imperium. That's not to say that I didn't have games where I played terribly. I mean that every game of TI that I have played, I have always felt like it was worth the time and effort that I put into it. This is actually the only game that I will study strategy for. Normally I don't like that because I feel like it robs me of the sense of discovery I get while playing a game. But in TI, we assign out our factions early, I read up on it, I determine the strategy, and try to plan out things ahead of time. We all come to the table feeling like everyone is playing at the top of their game. It's such an amazing experience, and one that I don't think I'll ever get tired of.
6.
Number 6 is Clans of Caledonia. This game shares a lot in common with Terra Mystica and Gaia Project, but with a few things that I love that the other games don't have. Now, like those other two games, you'll be moving out across a map and putting out things from your player board, except in this game you're putting out things like workers, livestock, and production buildings. Also, like the other two games, you'll get a little bonus for building next to one of your opponents. Each round you're going to be producing or refining goods based on what you have on the map, and using those goods to fill contracts. This is the first game that elevates this game for me above the others. When you fill contracts, you'll be gaining imported goods, which will be worth a certain number of points at the end of the game, but the amount of points that they will be worth depends on how rare those goods are. So the more of them you import, the less scoring potential they have, which becomes a cool balancing act, and you might even start hoping that your opponents can import more tobacco so that your sugarcane is worth more points. I've said before that I love games that have a sense of progression, and Clans of Caledonia definitely has that. You'll start with just a few pieces on the board and start building out, but you'll also be unlocking better shipping, more merchants that you can send to the market, which is another one of my favorite things about this game. I love markets that have a dynamic feel to them, where you can buy and sell goods and cause the market to fluctuate. This is another reason to keep an eye on what your opponents are doing, because you don't want to drive up the cost of a particular good and give them a huge payday because they've been stockpiling that particular resource. There's a new expansion coming out for this game, and while I'm obviously pretty excited to check it out, I'm also a little concerned because there's no extra space in the box for expansion content. So I'm kind of hoping that they make the expansion box big enough to fit both the expansion and base game in it. I mean, obviously I'm going to pick it up anyway, but still.
5.
Number 5 is my favorite game from Uwe Rosenberg, and not one that I see on many other people's top games lists, and that's Glass Road. I remember the first time that I played this game, it really blew my mind. There were a couple of things about it that I had not really seen done before that I thought were pretty amazing. The first is the card play. We're playing as artisans on the glass road in Bavaria, trying to clear forests and build workshops that we can use to generate points. The way the card play works in this game is that players will have a hand of the same 15 character cards, and you'll choose a hand of cards at the beginning of the round, 5 cards. And if you play a card on your turn that no one else has played, you get to take both the abilities on that card. But if anyone else has chosen the same card for that round, they will get to play that card on your turn, and you'll each only get to take one of the card actions. This is a really cool thing that always has you trying to get into your opponent's heads. If you're able to time things right, you might be able to piggyback off your opponent's cards while also playing cards that you alone will use. This means that your opponent may end up with cards left in their hand at the end of the card round that they weren't able to use. This adds a lot of excitement to the game when you reveal a card and wait to see if anyone else has chose that card as well. The other thing that I love about Glass Road, and probably its biggest hook, are the resource wheels. I love trying to manage these things. If you haven't seen these before, these resource wheels are essentially large dials, and instead of taking tokens to represent your available resources, you're going to move them around this wheel. The catch is that whenever resources move away from the arms of the dial will move too, meaning that you will automatically spend resources to produce one of the premium goods, either brick or glass. So often what you're trying to do is to move up all resources but one until you're ready to trigger that production. You might instead be trying to save those resources to pay for your chosen character cards or spending them on building tiles that you will place on your player board to help you manipulate your goods in some way or provide you with points at the end of the game. It's such a cool concept, and I know that he used something at least similar in Ora et Labora, but I've never had a chance to play that game, and I've never seen this used anywhere else. Such a great mechanism. It's a very beautiful game in my opinion. I love the artwork, especially on the tiles and the player boards. It gives me a very autumn by the fireplace kind of vibe. My number 4 game of all time is Glenmore 2 Chronicles. I actually still own my copy of the original Glenmore as well, which was in my top 10 before Chronicles came out. Glenmore 2 just added so many cool new ideas with all of the Chronicles that you can swap in and out of the game that will change up the game, sometimes in subtle ways, sometimes in really big ways. There are also a few rules changes that I thought improved the gameplay just a bit in Glenmore 2 as well, like the way that chieftains work and the addition of the map that you can travel around for added benefits. So in Glenmore 2, you're going to be moving your player piece around a square of market tiles. You can move as far forward around the square as you'd like, but you can never move backwards. Then you'll take the tile you land on, provided that you can pay the cost if there is one. These tiles will do a number of things like add more Scots, produce resources, or convert resources into other resources or points. You're restricted to only placing the tile next to one of your Scots in your estate though, so you kind of have to set yourself up ahead of time. Once you place the tile down though, you're going to activate that tile and every tile adjacent to it. There are some restrictions as to how many resources a tile can hold though, so you'll have to plan ahead for that as well. You might also be able to get locks and castles, which will give you some special abilities. You'll have to be careful when you're placing your tiles out though, because at the end of the game, you'll lose points for every tile space more than what the smallest estate has, meaning that you want to keep your estate small and efficient rather than large and sprawling. So you'll probably want to start building over tiles at some point. Another cool scoring twist is that at the end of each round and at the end of the game, you're going to score points for certain things based on the difference between what you've collected and what the player with the least of that item have collected. So, for example, say we're scoring whiskey barrels produced. I've produced 2 and you've produced 5. Since you've produced 3 more than me, you're going to score 3 points for those whiskey barrels. It also works this way for number of Scots that you were able to move into your home castle, the number of landmarks, either castles or locks, and number of person tiles that you've collected. It's such a cool and clever way to handle scoring that keeps you checking on your opponent's progress and making sure that they aren't running away with any achievements. There are a ton of chronicles you can add to change the game up as well. There's no way I can go through all of them in this video without making it way too long.
3.
Number 3 was my number 1 for several years, and it's my highest rated Stefan Feld game, and that's Castles of Burgundy. It's funny because I still remember when I sat down to learn this game, because up until that point I had played mostly fairly lightweight kind of gateway level games, and so I was pretty intimidated by the idea of learning this serious game for serious gamers. But holy crap, did I fall immediately in love with this game. There are a lot of things to consider when you're playing it, but the gameplay is so smooth that it just clicked for us almost immediately. I've talked about it with other Feld games on this top 100, but one of my favorite things that he does is take a relatively simple action selection mechanism and gives you a lot of interesting decisions to make. If you've not played Castles of Burgundy yet, basically what you're going to be doing is rolling 2 dice and then using those dice to perform actions. Most of the time what you're going to be doing with these actions is either taking tiles from the central board or placing them from your reserve onto your estate board. These tiles might give you points, or they might let you do other things like combo more actions together, move up the turn order track, or buy and sell goods. You're also going to get points for completely filling in an area of your estate of the same color, with points going down round by round, so there's an incentive to complete them early. We've owned 3 different versions of this game so far. We had a copy of the original, which we sold when the second edition came out, which included updated art and all of the expansions. We even have the dice game version, which I talked about way back in the early part of this top 100. Now we've got the special edition from Awakened Realms, which is absolutely gorgeous. It's got beautiful art, amazing castle pieces, and even includes a new Vineyards expansion, which gives you even more options to score points. I think the only version of this game that I haven't owned yet is the card game, but if I'm going to play a game of castles that takes up that much table space, I think I'd just rather play the fancy new edition.
2.
My number 2 had a very real shot at making my number 1 this year, especially with the beautiful new edition that we got for this game this year also, and that's La Granja. I love this game so much, and the more that I play it, the more I wonder if it's going to leap into first place one of these years. I've even played a bunch of solo games of this on BGA. First off, it has multi-use cards, which I love. And I especially love how they're used in this game. You can play them as either a farm improvement, a field for crops, as an order that you can fill, or as a helper that you can hire to your farm. And depending on what you decide to do with a card, that will determine where you're going to slot the card under your player map, which is incredibly satisfying, especially with the new multi-layered board from the deluxe master set from Board and Dice. You're going to be choosing a card to play at the beginning of each round, so you'll always be shifting up your abilities from round to round. But you can also take certain actions which will let you gain or play more cards. And the way you're going to be taking those actions is another of my favorite mechanisms, dice drafting. At the beginning of each round, the first player rolls dice, twice the number of players plus one. Then players take turns drafting those dice, and depending on the number on those on the die that you choose, you're going to be taking an action associated with that number. Once everyone has taken their second die, there will be one die left over, and all of the players will get to use that action. Once this phase is over, you'll select one of your donkey tiles to use. This is going to tell you how many deliveries you'll be able to make this round, and how many spaces you're going to move up the siesta track, which is a first player track. The first player changes hands if necessary, and then you will make your deliveries. Timing is pretty crucial too when it comes to making deliveries, no matter which type of delivery you're going to make. If you're making a delivery to the main board, you want to be the first one to fill up a row, because then you get a bonus on top of the special ability that it grants you for the rest of the game. If you're delivering to one of your order cards, I think in the game they're called market barrows, then you're going to be playing a little area control game in the center of the market area. Placing one of your markers on a higher value number will kick off any markers on lower number spaces adjacent to it, and will score you points. Like a lot of games on this list, this game gives you a lot of opportunities for some major combo turns, which are all super satisfying and make you feel like a board game genius, even when you are definitely not. This game is so good, and it may very well end up in my top spot next year, but who knows. In the meantime, let's go on to the game that is my number one this year. My number one game has been my number one for I think 3 or 4 years now, and that's Brass Birmingham. Now I have played Lancashire, which I also think is a great game, but Birmingham is the version that I like best, probably because of the beer. This is a game that is not really the easiest to teach, just because some of the concepts seem pretty strange at first. If you put out a building that, say, produces coal, anybody may be able to spend that coal. It's not your coal. And that's actually a good thing, because once all of that coal is spent from a building tile, it flips over and it will start to earn you points. During the game, you're going to be trying to create routes, either on your own or with the help of other players, so that you can ship off the different goods from your buildings out to the foreign markets, which will earn you more points. In the first half of the game, these routes come in the form of canals, and then once the deck of location cards runs out, there's an intermediate scoring, and all of the canal tiles are removed from the board, and you start over again, this time with railways. It sounds like a bad thing, but it kind of gives you a chance to pivot your strategy if you think that's necessary. Once you get into the second half of the game, there are certain buildings that can no longer be built, so you might have to take a development action to remove those buildings from your board to get to the better ones. I think the biggest reason I love this game so much is all of the positive player interaction. It's very difficult to do well in this game just being off on your own little corner of the map doing your own thing. You really want to be in the mix with all of the other players, because that gives you access to their coal and their steel, and you can utilize their route links as well. It's definitely not a semi-cooperative game by any means, but yet you're all going to be relying on one another to accomplish what you need to accomplish. The Roxley production of this game is, in my opinion, absolutely beautiful, whether you use the day or night side of the board. I even got the iron clays as a gift, which I use for money in just about all of my games now. I've considered getting some of the upgraded pieces for this game, like little 3D canals, barges, and trains, but I'm pretty happy with how the game looks right out of the box. I would say that this is the game that I am probably the most tempted to bling out with those kind of upgrades, though. But Brass Birmingham is my favorite game for another year, although Le Grand Ham might be coming for it. Well, we made it. That's 100 of my favorite games. I want to say thanks again to everyone who watched and commented, and I've loved seeing what you folks think of these games as well. This has been a lot of fun, but like I said at the top of the video, I'm ready to start working on some new content, so stay tuned for that. And until next time, let's get another round for the table.